Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another film review. Tonight we're film reviewing a very gritty film noir prison film. And it's called Brute Force. Now this is an old movie, and it stars a very young Burt Lancaster. And it's based in this sort of like this penitentiary or prison in America, and it's all about the relationships between the inmates, and it's a very tough old sort of prison. It's a very gritty film. It's very raw, and it's very sort of like it's a very sort of serious film for its time, if you like. You know, there's no sort of humour in it at all. It's quite downbeat, and and Burt Lancaster plays one of the inmates who's just come back from solitary. He's been in solitary for a while, because some incident has happened. And then there's another prisoner in there called Wilson, who's been like the prison guards sort of informant, and they've all sort of found out. And let's just move this down a bit, guys. And they're all sort of planning to revenge this inmate, because obviously nobody likes an informant. Anyway, so he's his numbers up, and there's one part in the film where they're kind of like planning to sort of like take him out in like one of the work sort of factories in the prison. And so at that stage we see the inmates starting to fight, and they're starting to sort. That's all just a distraction, because once they've gotten distracted, 3 or 4 of the other guys sort of corner this guy down with these sort of flame torches into the corner, and he sort of falls into this sort of press machine and gets killed. So they got rid of the informant. And this sort of film, sort of, again, it's that sort of, it's all that kind of film. It's a very gritty sort of story. Burt Lancaster, who since he's returned, has had enough. He hates the prison guard. He hates everything about prison, and he's talking about getting out. So he goes to speak to one of the older sort of inmates to sort of say, you know, to sort of plan some sort of way of getting out. But he says, look, I'm up for parole in 12 years. I've just got to stick 12 more years out, then I'm out of here. So he's got to try and figure out a different way to sort of get out. And he sort of shares a cell with sort of like 5 or 6 other prisoners, and they've sort of all bonded. And you know, they kind of all bonded together as inmates, that cell, and they tried to look out for one another. And like there's another scene in the film when they're at like a movie night, when they're all watching a movie, but one of the cell inmates from Burt Lancaster's cell stays in his room to write a letter to his wife. And occasionally it sort of breaks away out to the real life to sort of show some stories on how they got there. Like this guy that's writing to his wife, he got there because he stole some money. He stole £3,000, probably from his work, and he's bought his wife a fur coat and all this sort of thing, and he's ended up in the prison. Anyway, so but he's quite a bit like the informant. He's quite a sort of vulnerable sort of person, you know, easily sort of weak character in the film. So our prison guard then approaches him while he's in his room writing this letter alone, to try and persuade him to be his new informant. And he's saying, no, I can make life a lot easier for you. And he went, what, like you did with Wilson? And he said, well, Wilson made mistakes and stuff like this, but he says, I won't do it. He says, I might be a thief, I might be this and that, but I'm not going to be an informant. And then the prison guard tells him, I think it's a white lie, about his wife saying that she wants a divorce, which obviously devastates him, and he ends up hanging himself in the cell, and they all return and find him hanging from the cell. And it's like that, and this is very horrible sort of prison guard, sort of like one of the main prison guards. He's just horrible, and he's just trying to get informants and stuff. He tries to blame Burt Lancaster for all these sort of things that are going on. Obviously, there's been the guy killed in the factory, and now this guy's hanged himself. He's just come out of solitary, and he thinks, it's all down to him. And he goes, well, he knows he's got an alibi because he was in different places, and all this kind of thing's going on. And then you've got the doctor in the prison, and the prison warden who's trying to change things around. They're actually trying to make these people better people, so when they leave prison they won't go back to crime. But it's not working out like that, because they've got quite the criminals in there are all sort of learning skills off one another, and they're going out back when they do leave prison to be a worse criminal, and they're trying to turn it around. And you've got like the commissioners come down and said to them, well, look, I said to the warden, I'll let you remain here, but if you don't change things around, he's going to have to make some big changes in the prison. He wants him to be a lot stricter, and he is quite strict already, but he wants him to be really strict, and the warden sort of struggles with that. So he sort of lays down the rules to the prisoners, saying, look, guys, I'm going to give it straight to you. If all these sort of incidents don't stop, he's going to take away all their sort of privileges and all this sort of thing. It's going to be like a real horrible sort of place, and it is a horrible place already. So all these kind of things are going on. So is this prison guard going to find a new informant? Are the prisoners going to have enough and revolt and sort of like take over the prison? Or is Burt Lancaster going to find a way to escape? Or is he going to find a way to change things in the prison? You need to try and watch it to find out if you can. What do I think of Brute Force? It's an amazing film. It's such a cool film. I mean, I do like film noir films, the old sort of black and white sort of films that are more of a serious kind of film. They're not like a comedy and stuff like that. Film noir films are sort of films that are quite serious storylines. It's not necessarily in a bad way. Sometimes it could be a romance. Other times they can be like a gangster film or things like that. But they all seem to be films that are around this sort of 1930s, 1940s sort of era. And they're all made with like a serious kind of backstory. And this one's got loads of little stories going off in it. Obviously, you've got all the prisoners with their different stories while they're in there. And it's not explained what Burt Lancaster was doing in solitary, but later on in the film, I'm sure that was going to come out. And because you say, bits at a time, you start hearing their stories and why they're in there and things like this. The pluses of this version by Arrow is it's a fantastic picture quality. It gives you information that before the film starts that they spent 2 years restoring this film, restoring it to sort of like a real best sort of way it can look, and it does look stunning in on the Blu-ray in this sort of 2K sort of restoration. It does look really, really nice. Fantastic cast, really well acted, really, really convincing. You do get that sort of feel of like being in an isolated prison. It must be horrible sharing the cell with, there's about 6 of them per cell. It must be horrible. But there also must be that sort of bonding thing as well going on. But it must be a horrible sort of a place to be away from your loved ones. And they seem to, in those days, lock you up for long times for something not simple, but like stealing. That's not put anyone's life at threat, has it? It's kind of drastic. This guy's been put in prison for a long, long time for stealing that money. But I think the laws and that were so much different back then. Yeah, the story is fantastic. It is all about this sort of the daily lives of this sort of prison and these prisoners that are trying to cope with it, and the guards are trying to prevent gangs starting up within the prison, but it's a prison, and in this sort of time, I think gangs were prolific, and there's nothing they could do about it. And so all these sort of like problems in one building, it just rings catastrophe, doesn't it? So, but yeah, watch it and find out to see what happens. I'm gonna score this an amazing watch and give it a 9 out of 10. It's a really cool film. It's quite a lengthy film as well for its day. It lasts about an hour and 40 minutes. So it's quite, that's how in depth the story is. So you do need to commit some time to it. But it's absolutely fantastic. Really, really cool. It's a part of a box set I've got of theirs of film noir sort of prison films. And this is one from the box set, and it's really, really cool. And it's just such a great, it's just so, well, I don't know the words, it's just so gritty is the only word I can use to sort of like describe the look of the film and the story of the film. It's a very gritty story. It's fantastic. Brute Force, 9 out of 10. Any of you guys seen it? If you have, let me know down below what you think of it. I do love these sort of old sort of film noir films. There's a lot of sort of gangster ones with Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney and all these sort of films that are out there. So I do like those, but I like the ones that veer away a little bit from the obvious sort of ones. And the sort of story of the prison, it's really, really cool. Yes, there's been loads of prison films throughout years. I mean, what an obvious place to make a movie about. You had the Birds of Birdman from Alcatraz and all these sort of prison films, Murder in the First and all things like that over the years. But this one is one that's probably just been sort of forgotten about until Arrow sort of brought it out a few years ago. So it's really cool to actually bring this to my channel and bring something a bit different from the horror. But this has horror in it, if you think of it. The horror of this film is being in a prison and being isolated away from your loved ones and trying to survive these horrible inmates that are quite, you know, they're in there for crimes, and then you've got a horrible guards. It's a horrible place to be. No wonder Burt Lancaster's character is trying to get out of there. So anyway, thanks for watching this, guys. Look after yourselves, look after one another, and I really hope I see you all soon.